This is part 3, eminent domain, valuation, and the part taken. The purpose of eminent domain valuation for ODOT is to estimate compensation for the taking of private property needed for the highway project. Compensation is compensation for the part taken, compensation for damages, if there are any, to what remains of the property, and compensation for temporary easements needed for construction of the project. The aggregate of those three is the total estimated compensation for the taking. So let's talk a little bit about compensation for the part taken. From the case in Ohio, Masheter v. Keeby, and after so testifying, the witness may make an allocation as to the value of the land taken as part of the entire tract and damages to the residue. Obviously, on this one, we are focusing on allocation as to the value of the land taken as part of the entire tract. That is the basis for the part taken compensation. This requires ODOT to value the whole property before the taking, then determine the unit value of the land component of the whole property, and then allocate that unit of value to the land taken. So is the entire tract the whole property or the larger parcel, and are these the same thing? So what is the larger parcel? It's the portion of the property having unity of ownership, contiguity, and unity of use. And that came from Real Estate Valuation and Litigation, the second edition. Also, it's a single contiguous physical tract may constitute a single larger parcel or multiple larger parcels. And the source for that is the Yellow Book, the 2016 edition. So a larger parcel may or may not be the entire tract or the whole property. So what is the whole property? Ownership supersedes unity of highest and best use. So the entirety of the property that is under the same ownership must be valued as if one buyer was going to purchase the whole property. If there are separate interests or estates, they are regarded as one estate and are valued as one whole. It is not proper to individually value the component parts of the whole, then some of the separate values of the divided estates cannot exceed the value of the property as a whole. So the whole property and the entire tract are the same thing. So we're going to amplify this with a short illustration here. What you're looking at is a corner lot with 4 parcels on it. Lot A is improved with a house, zoned single family residential, and it can legally be sold as its own entity. It's got its own tax ID number. Lot B is improved with a house, also zoned single family residential, and it could legally be sold as an individual unit. Lot C, also improved with a house, zoned single family residential, can also be legally sold on its own. And Lot D is improved with a 3-unit commercial building, zoned commercial. It too can legally be sold on its own. So we have a WD taking from this property, illustrated by that red line. WD taking in ODOT vernacular is a fee simple taking, leaving the right of access to the residue property. So let's assume Fred Smith owns lots A through D and leases all the properties. So what is the larger parcel and what is the whole property with respect to this WD taking? Well, first let's take a look at what the larger parcel is. The taking is only from Lot D, which has a commercial use that's distinctly different from the residential uses shared by lots A, B, and C. The taking has no impact on lots A, B, and C. Therefore, the larger parcel is D, as it has unity of ownership. Fred Smith has unity of highest and best use, which is commercial, and lots A and C, though contiguous, don't share a strong unity of use. So the whole property is, well, we have to go through this analysis. Fred Smith owns lots A through D. That's the whole property, the entire tract under the ownership of Smith. The taking only affects a small portion of the whole. It only affects Lot D, which has a use that is different from the other properties. However, it is not proper to value Lot D separately from the whole. So if we did that, assume Lot A sold for $70,000. Lot B has a market value of $60,000. Lot C has a market value of $50,000. And Lot D has a market value of $250,000. So if we valued each of those lots individually and added them together, the aggregate sum is $430,000. If this were done, it would be unknown if the separate value of Lot D would exceed the contributory value of Lot D to the value of the whole property. Remember, the sum of the separate values cannot exceed the value of the whole. That came from Schaefer v. Sauer, an Ohio Supreme Court decision. So if the whole property were valued as a mixed-use property, assume that that value was $350,000, one buyer buying the aggregate of lots A, B, C, D together. Then what we would need to do is determine the contributory value of Lot D, the contributory value of C, the contributory value of B, and the contributory value of A. That would be the proper way of valuing the whole property. Therefore, the proper valuation method is to value the aggregate of lots A, B, C, and D as one mixed-use property to be sold to one buyer. All right, compensation for the part taken. Here's another illustration. What we've got is an existing road with a lot on it that's 400 foot wide, 200 feet. It's got 80,000 square feet or 1.837 acres. And we have a 10-foot WD taking from along the road frontage. Using the sales comparison approach, we're going to value the whole property. Small acreage tracts, let's assume they're selling at $25,000 an acre. $25,000 an acre times 1.837 acres equals $45,925. So now we make an allocation as to the value of the land taken as a part of the entire tract. So the size of the WD take area is 10 by 400 feet or 4,000 square feet. We divide that by 43,560 square feet, number of square feet an acre, to determine the acreage size of what's taken. So that's 0.092 acres is what's taken. So we're going to allocate from the whole property. So 0.092 acres times $25,000 an acre equals $2,300 for the part taken. Compensation for the part taken is $2,300. Compensation for the part taken is the basis for ODOT'S simplistic valuation formats. Most acquisitions are small partial takings. Where it's clear that the remaining property is not adversely affected, the compensation amount is not large. So we use the value analysis report for these things. It's used under the waiver of appraisal provision and regulation. It must be clear there's no damages to the residue. Compensation cannot exceed $10,000. The whole is valued as if it were a vacant site. Land taken is allocated based on the whole property, and site improvements in the take are also considered. The value finding report is an appraisal that's used under the simplistic appraisal provision and regulation, not the waiver, but the simplistic appraisal provision. It must be clear there are no damages to the residue. Compensation cannot exceed $65,000. The whole is valued as if it were a vacant site. Land taken is allocated based on the whole, and site improvements in the take are also considered. So these formats are used as they are allowed in regulation. They're used when there's a small partial taking, when it's clear there's no damages, because it's going to be a waste of taxpayer money to have a full-blown before and after analysis done to prove or disprove the existence of damages when it's clear there are none. Such an analysis would provide no more meaningful accuracy to the compensation estimate. Here's another rule to be aware of. No matter what, if there is a taking from the property, ODOT must pay compensation for the take. That comes from the Ohio Constitution, Article 1, Section 19. And finally, ignore project influence in the before valuation of the whole property. That comes both from federal regulation in 49 CFR Part 24 and in Ohio regulation, which is the Ohio Administrative Code. This means disregarding any decrease or increase in the market value caused by the project or within the scope of the project for the property before the taking. In partial takings, there is consideration of the project on the value of the residue after the taking. And that came, again, from the Yellow Book 2016 edition.